When the Studio Display was released a couple of months ago, it was released to go along with the Mac Studio, but I've just hooked it up to a MacBook Pro 16-inch, and I thought I'd let you know how I'm finding it. At the end of 2021, when the M1 MacBook Pros were unveiled with the new iteration of the M1 chips, the Pro and the Max, we thought we had all of our dreams come true. We had a beautifully balanced keyboard, that gorgeous mini LED screen, ports galore, 3 Thunderbolt ports, an HDMI port, SD card slot, MagSafe charging, battery life that seemed to go on for days and days at a time, quiet, powerful computing that we'd never seen the likes of before. Everything was there. As much as I wanted to get a 16-inch MacBook Pro, I still thought at the back of my mind, would I at some point regret not having a larger screen to work on? These screens are fantastic, and I wrote a blog about that last week actually, saying how somehow this 16-inch screen seems bigger than it is, but still you can't beat real estate. And as good and as immersive as the wonderful screen and the panel on the 16-inch MacBook Pro is, I knew somewhere deep in my heart of hearts that I wanted a bigger screen. Well, of course, as much as this seemed an absolute dream come true when it was released in November of 2021, this year it even got better when they suddenly announced they were going to be getting back into the panels and display market, and we had the Studio Display. So I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I've now linked up the Studio Display along with the MacBook Pro. So I thought I'd just go into how I found it over the first couple of days since I've had these two working side by side together. The way I actually got my hands on these two bits of kit, the MacBook Pro and the Studio Display, was, well, odd. We all know that we're going through something of a supply crisis at the moment. I placed the order for both the MacBook Pro and the Studio Display at the very end of March. When I placed those orders direct with Apple in the UK, I think they were giving me suggested delivery times of somewhere around about the beginning of May for the MacBook and sometime towards the beginning of June for the Studio Display. On the week that the MacBook was due to turn up, suddenly I got an email saying, no, it had been stretched out and it was going to be at the end of May into June at the earliest. And I feared the worst was going to be coming with the Studio Display as well. So I began shopping around, and I was really lucky. I got these two bits of kit from third-party retailers in the UK. Now, the MacBook Pro turned up probably about 10 days, 2 weeks before the Studio Display, which was great because it gave me time to get used to that MacBook. And it is wonderful, don't get me wrong. And I said a moment ago that somehow the 16-inch screen seems bigger, and it does. I've worked on pretty complicated tasks on there, timelines in Premiere Pro for these videos I edit, and in multi-layered Photoshop documents as well. I've done a lot of work on that 16-inch screen in the time that I've had it, and it does feel great. It feels bigger than you would expect a laptop to be. If you're thinking of getting one of these machines, get yourself along to an Apple store and take a look. But it's hard in store. I did that in store, and somehow, because the stores are so big, the screen still feels smaller. When you've got it home and it's on your desk and it's in front of you, it feels great. It honestly does. You won't regret it. And it's given me this air of kind of a freedom, actually, that I know that if one day I don't want to be tied to the desk and working, I can unhook it from the Studio Display, and then I can go off and work just on the 16-inch MacBook Pro. The screen is that good. I like having two displays working side by side, and that's how I use mine. I haven't got the MacBook in clamshell mode. I like having that multi-display functionality. It just seems to make my workflow go better. But of course, on those days you want to be free from the desk, you've now got that with the MacBook Pro. I originally said I wasn't sure about the battery life on the MacBook Pro. Turns out I was wrong. I don't even take the charger with me now. I've got that much confidence in it. I know even if I'm running pretty intensive tasks on it, it's going to last me a good 4 or 5 hours. If I'm doing lighter tasks, it can be as long as 7 to 8 hours even. It really is that good. So it's a perfect kind of scenario having these two working together. And where I've really started to notice the benefit is having these two displays side by side. And that's something I wanted to draw your attention to because they are marginally different. So I've been used to Retina displays. I've had Macs and been working on Macs for over 10 years now. And I guess the machine I was really comparing it to was the 4K 27-inch iMac. Don't worry, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's been in all of my videos, I think, until now. It's in my office. I'm not doing anything with it. It's still working day to day. But when I suddenly got these two screens on the MacBook Pro and the Studio Display, 5K is just another level. It really is. If you haven't got yourself in front of one of these displays or machines yet, do go along to an Apple store and take a look. The colors are so immersive. They are so deep and so rich, but there is a marginal difference. It won't really come through on this video, unfortunately, but I can tell you that when I'm looking at blacks on the MacBook Pro, they are just that little bit more black than on the studio display. Now, look, I'm being fussy. I'm being really picky. I can work really happily on either of these screens. And without a doubt, I can tell you that in the 10 plus years I've been working with Mac, this is the best setup that I've ever had. The MacBook Pro with its beautiful, beautiful mini LED screen and the studio display side by side just is a joy to work on. But if I had to pick one display that was slightly better than the other, it would just go to the MacBook Pro. The refresh rate actually is really subtle. You kind of don't notice it, but it's just there. Even with moving the mouse and the cursor around, you can just see it's quicker and it's sharper, but it's marginal. It is the colors that are the defining point for me. And again, both are good, but somehow that mini LED just beats out on the studio display. I love the studio display. I love the size that it gives me. And one little trick that I found at the weekend, actually, when I was editing my first video with this setup now, was that I did all of the main editing and color grading on the studio display. And then at the very final point, before I was about to export, I took it over to the MacBook Pro. And the fine granular details that you can see, the differences that you can see in the colors on, say, a video export over on the mini LED screen of the MacBook Pro as opposed to the studio display, was a revelation to me. There was a difference, and it's something I'm going to do all the time now, be it Photoshop work or be it in Premiere Pro for these videos. I would always do the final look at color on the smaller but better 16-inch MacBook Pro screen. It's just great having these two working side by side. I feel so lucky, but honestly, it is the best workflow I've ever had for a Mac setup. When I first got the studio display, if you look back at a video that I'll link just up here, it was kind of a tease because it turned up on a Friday, actually, and I didn't want to just rush and unbox it because I knew somehow I wanted to do something with it in a video, not a full unboxing as we know, but I wanted to do something with it, at least let you guys see me taking it out of the box for the first time. So I had it sitting there for a full day boxed, and then the day that I did unbox it, the moment I unboxed it, it was in the middle of a video, so I didn't get a chance to really enjoy it and sit back and look at it. It was only sort of after that and a few days since that I've really got used to having that display in front of me, and as I mentioned that 27-inch iMac, I look forward coming back here now to get in front of these two panels because honestly, once you've seen the color, the depth of color and the blackness and the sharpness and the crispness of these displays, there really is no turning back. So I didn't have a chance to give you my thoughts on the studio display on the last video because obviously I was just literally getting it out and putting it on the desk. Thoughts now, a few days in, I'm really happy with it. I really am. It sits just a little bit lower than the iMac if you're trying to get an idea of its height on the desk. I've only got the original basic stand. I haven't got the height adjustable stand, but because I've got that riser that was built for me on this studio desk, it's not a problem. The weight of the monitor is roughly the same to an iMac. They feel very similar. The build quality is exactly what you'd expect. And even the plugs on the back, the ports on the back, they've got a really solid, resounding clunk as you push them in. You have to give it a good, proper insert to get it in there. And it feels lovely. It's a beautiful bit of kit, beautifully engineered. I have tried the speakers as well now. And for a monitor, they are actually good. I can't really play anything on the stream because I'll get a copyright strike. And anyway, it's only going to come through the same mic. It won't tell you anything. But to be honest, if you're just consuming day-to-day content, listening to podcasts, or if you're listening to music on Spotify or Apple Music, these speakers that are built into the studio display are slightly better, as you'd expect, than a MacBook Pro because they've got more space, more air around them, and they'll see you through a day of listening, no problems at all. They're good. They're good in the mids. They're not too piercing on the highs, and overall not too bassy, which I find quite tiring if it's a very heavy bass sound. But the sound stage is okay, and you won't be disappointed if you're looking to use these speakers on the studio display. But something you will be disappointed with is the camera. I've used it a couple of times now, and I won't be using it again. You can see I've got my Logitech C920 up there, the 1080p camera. It's way better. It really is. I'd never experienced center stage before. I'd not had an iPad with center stage on, and it's the first time I'd seen that. Yeah, it's clever, but everything I'm learning about the problems they've had with the camera on the studio display is all due to the fact of the compression they're trying to get for the center stage. And I don't think it's a price worth paying. I don't know about you. I know we see the happy groups on the Apple trailers for using center stage. Everyone grouping into a camera together. It's never happened for me. At best, it would be one other person might come into frame. but I'm never going to use it, to be honest with you. So it's a shame they've decided to compromise the quality of the camera for center stage. And my take would have been, well, if you're going to put a camera in there, make it good. And if it's an expensive display, and if you can't put a camera in that does the display justice, then surely just don't bother. That would have been my thoughts on it, but clearly they had other thoughts. It's a shame, because the camera really is the only thing that I don't like about the studio display. Other than that, it's a big thumbs up for me, and everything you heard about it pretty much is true. I have never felt more creative or more inclined to be productive and creative than since I've been sitting in front of these two amazing bits of kit. I know the MacBook is just out of frame, but they're sitting there now, both working. I've got the audio recording on the MacBook Pro, and I'll be doing the editing later on after I finish shooting this video on these two bits of kit, and I'm really looking forward to it. I did a clean install on the Mac, as you know, and that did really reap rewards for me. Everything has worked perfectly. I know I've got the latest versions of everything running, be it Audio Hijack or all of the Creative Cloud apps, of which, if you are an Adobe user and you've got the desktop app for Creative Cloud and you use Premiere Pro, there's been a problem on the quick export function. And funnily enough, I was talking to SAGI about that on our podcast, and he's noticed it too. Well, I got in touch with Adobe support. They knew there was a problem with the export, so they've released a beta version. And if you're a subscriber to Creative Cloud, in your desktop apps, you can download and run side by side the beta apps with the full releases. And I've been using the beta app of Premiere Pro for the last few days now, and it seems to be a big improvement. So I'm going to carry on using the beta app until they make it a full release, and I'll certainly be editing this video on it. So if you've had any problems with Premiere Pro and export, I suggest you go and grab that beta version and run it for yourself. But guys, what about you? Have you got yourself a studio display, and have you got it hooked up to a MacBook Pro, an M1 MacBook Pro? Is it the 14? Or is it the 16-inch? Let me know. And equally, I'd love to know if you, like me, think it is just a subtly better screen on the MacBook than it is on the studio display. Both are great, and as I say, I look forward to sitting down in front of these every day now. I feel so creative and so productive, but I'd love to know what your thoughts are and how you have found working with these two great bits of kit. One thing I would just like to say is that cable they give us, the Thunderbolt 4 cable they give us with the studio display, it's too short. They should have given us a longer 2-meter cable. I've got a pretty tidy setup here, but even I found that the meter cable was pretty much at full stretch no matter what I wanted to do with it. They charge us £1,500 for that display. They should have put a longer cable into it. But outside of that, everything has worked just as I was hoping. But I'd love to know what your stories are as well, so do make sure to get involved and let me know how you're finding using these two bits of kit. And if you'd like to know about how I found my first few days with the M1 MacBook Pro, the video's up next. I'll see you soon.